We live in a culture today that calls good evil and calls evil good. All the while, the church has been in a state of sleep while spiritual forces of evil are taking over our spiritual ground, forcing us into a dark corner of silence and shame. But that's changing. The church has woken up and become more alert and prepared to claim victory in this spiritual battle. And as the time approaches for the rapture of the church, we see that God is in the midst of a major wake-up call. In his new book, Awake, America's Final Great Awakening, Tim Thompson uncovers the spiritual condition of the church and shares practical ways to be more effective by boldly speaking truth into the life of others, challenging spiritual leaders, and holding government officials accountable. How we address the cultural issues of our day has a major impact on the lives of the unsaved. And if we're going to play an effective role in this great awakening, we need to develop a new strategy because let's face it, what we've been doing isn't working. It's not too late. It's time to be awake and stay awake.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Our Watch. How many of you here, we just showed the commercial for Tim Thompson's book, Awake. How many of you have had a chance to read the book yet? All right, good. Good to see some hands up. And so we wanted to remind you about for that and thank you for purchasing the book and reading the book. If you have the book and would like to have Pastor Tim sign it, feel free to bring it, and he can do that for you here. And if you haven't already, I'm telling you, you're missing out. This is a great book, really, really in-depth, important information for the times that we're in right now. And so I would urge you to check that out. If you go to ourwatchnow.com, you can see that video again that we just showed. You can get a little bit more information about it. It is on Amazon. You can kind of get a glimpse of it there. But what we'd like to ask you to do, because this is going to help us to get this message out throughout the nation as much as possible, is if you go onto Amazon, purchase the book, read the book, and then once you decide that you like it, and I assure you that you will, and it's only 244 pages, it's not a huge book, then you can give it a review. And when you review it with a positive review on Amazon, that's going to help in all kinds of ways, because once people see that this is a well-read and well-liked book, then more people are going to be interested in it. So that is the ask. We appreciate your support on that. Now, we're going to be getting started here in just a few moments with Our Watch, and we have our guest tonight, Chris Harris, who is a retired Border Patrol agent who's going to be talking about what's happening down at the border. And so you're definitely in for a treat and some good information tonight. Next week, we are going to have Dr. Shawnee Anderson. And she's also got some really good things to talk about too. So you can get more information, like I said, at ourwatchnow.com. We're also going to be taking an offering in just a moment. And so before we do that and before we even kick off the night, would you join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, we're just so grateful that we can come together in this building tonight and to be able to talk about some issues that are relevant, they're current, they're important for all of us that have a Judeo-Christian mindset and a biblical worldview. And so we just pray that you bless the conversation between Tim and Chris tonight, that it would be one that goes far and wide and helps people to just be equipped with the knowledge that they need to be effective as we all want to take back the public square for your glory and for the right values. And so we lift up this night and everybody in it here in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so like I said, we'll be getting started in just a moment. The offering that we're taking right now, we know many of you have been supporting Our Watch. It's a nonprofit organization. We thank you for your support. It's because of partnership like that we're able to do what we do and that we're able to get involved in all the different ways that we are. And so we appreciate your support. You can also donate online for those of you watching online on YouTube right now. Also, just a reminder to follow on all the different social media sites and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I've got a quick video intro for you, and then we'll be getting started. So sit back and relax and enjoy Our Watch with Tim Thompson.
This past year, the radical left with their globalist mindset has burned down our cities, forced businesses to close, and tried to silence our churches. They told us to wear a mask and stay home to save lives, and many Christians remain silent. That is no longer an option. The silent majority will be silent no more, and the sleeping giant has been awakened. We are going to use our voice to take back the media, stop the censorship, and very loudly take back the public square. I'm Tim Thompson, and this is Our Watch.
Well, good evening, everybody. Good to see you all here tonight. So thankful that you came out. I want to say hello to everybody that is tuned in online. Welcome to Our Watch. Glad you are with us as well. Before we get started, I just want to give a little shout out to a friend of mine, Pastor Mike McClure up in Calvary Chapel, San Jose. Some of you may be familiar with his story. He, like us, is open, been wide open for a long time. That church has been going through the ringer, though. I was talking to him tonight, and they are now over $3 million in fines. Unbelievable. $3 million in fines just for being open and doing what the Lord has called him to do. Even after the Supreme Court did rule against their county. They don't care. That county doesn't care. They're still fining him. So, Pastor Mike, we're with you. We're praying for you. And we just pray the Lord's blessings of peace upon you. I mean, I was talking to him. He's got such a good attitude, and he's able to maintain a sense of humor. And I feel bad for him, though. I mean, that's just a tremendous weight that I know that he must be feeling, but he's not really showing like he's feeling it. He's doing a good job. So, Pastor Mike, we love you. Tonight, we want to answer two key questions for everybody. The first question is there a crisis at the border? And we might all say, yes, there is, but we want to really know, why is there a crisis, what's happening there, and really be able to have good, solid answers to that. The other question we want to answer is, what is the biblical worldview on this subject? What does the Bible say about our border? How do we as Christians respond to these types of things? I want to open up by saying verse Deuteronomy 27:19. Deuteronomy 27:19 says, "Cursed is anyone who denies justice to foreigners, orphans, or widows," and all the people will reply, "Amen." We are to want justice for all people. And there's a big cry right now in our culture for justice. And a lot of people think they know how to get justice, but they don't really know. They don't know what the Bible even says about it. Another verse I want to share with you, Deuteronomy 24:19 and 22, or through 22. It says, "When you're harvesting your crops and you forget to bring in a bundle of grain from your field, don't go back and get it. Leave it for the foreigners, orphans, and widows. Then the Lord, your God, will bless you in all you do. When you beat the olives from your olive trees, don't go over the boughs twice. Leave the remaining olives for the foreigners, orphans, and widows. When you gather the grapes in your vineyard, don't glean the vines after they've been picked. Leave the remaining grapes for the foreigners, for the orphans and the widows. Remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt. That is why I am giving you this command." So there was a command given to God's people to, as they're, let's say you're going through your vineyards. We live in wine country here. For everybody that's here, we're right out here in wine country. We get this. We see it every single year. You go through, you pick the grapes. The whole idea is when you go through and you don't get them all, you leave the rest there. And that was basically God's way of providing for the foreigners or the orphans or the widows. Keep in mind that it wasn't free. They had to go out and they had to do the work to get it, just like the person who owned the field had to do the work to get it. So it wasn't just a free handout. God expected that they would actually have part in the work that would take place in reaping that harvest. Now, those are just some things to kind of get us started, but I want to kind of continue to answer that question. Biblically, how do we view the border situation? And I also want to make sure we answer that first question, is there a crisis at the border? And to help us answer that question, we've invited out Christopher Harris. So if you would just welcome him tonight, retired Border Patrol agent Christopher Harris.
Thank you, Pastor Tim.
Of course. Christopher, we've had you out before, and you are on the news quite a bit, and you have You've been on the news that I do at his channel, the Christian Television Network. You're on with me. You've been on several times. We talk about what's going on at the border, and I've always appreciated your input. So glad to have you out tonight. It's weird. So right now you're retired, but you still have your finger very much on the pulse of what's happening down at the border, and you're able to say things that guys that aren't retired can't say because they have a fear of losing their job. And so we appreciate that you're a voice for many.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I did it a while ago for the union as a National Border Patrol counsel. That gave me certain protections to talk to the American people and tell the story. But now that I'm retired, I can even go further.
Right. But there are many of the Border Patrol agents. Well, you were telling me there are actually some that are starting to speak out, but.
So there is a gag order. The government says there isn't, but talking to them, this administration is very smart about it. It's all verbally. They're being told in musters, which is their, when they meet before they go out to shift, to not talk to anybody. And this is even for the PIO offices. The Border Patrol has PIO offices at at the sector level that talk to the press. Well, they're told not to. But there are agents, especially in Texas, that have been coming out now that are so disgusted, so disturbed as human beings of what they're seeing, that they are taking pictures surreptitiously and talking to the press and telling them how horrific these conditions are. And it's just not right. It's not something as a human being, as a Christian or whatever, you should want to see. And yeah, they are risking their careers, their jobs to speak out. They're doing it with, supposedly anonymity, but trust me, the government could probably find out sooner or later who they are. And so they are, for conscience, they're speaking out.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that they're doing that. I'm glad that you're here tonight shedding some light on things that are going on. There's a story that came out just today, and the story is about the Mexican president saying that Biden is to blame for the border surge. Here's what he says, and here's what this article says. As a surge of illegal immigrants arriving at the southern border continues, Mexico's president cast blame this week on President Joe Biden's policy, saying that he created certain expectations that are ultimately spurring illegal immigrants into making the trip. Now, is that the case, do you believe?
Absolutely. So there's two things you have to understand that's going on. One is the optics, and that's kind of what he's talking about, which is huge. I mean, the whole Democratic Party, almost all of them said, we're going to do this, this, and this. People believed him. They took him at his word in other countries. The cartels amplified that. The smuggling organizations amplified that because they want people to come across because they make money. The other thing is the actions that he took are also opening up the border. One of the biggest ones was the migration protection protocols, which was a tremendous feat of diplomacy by President Trump to get an agreement with a foreign nation state, Mexico, with a socialist president to allow people to remain in Mexico in line in an orderly manner before they made their claim for asylum and before they had their hearing. He undid that with one stroke of the pen, amongst many other things. And so you have two things going on, is the actions he took and also the optics. So they're both coming together to create this crisis at the border.
Right. Now, so as some people tune into the news, they're going to hear certain statistics. These have been coming out lately where they're saying, okay, well, this spike that we're seeing actually started under President Trump. So speak to that, because we know that that's not necessarily true. So let's talk about why we're seeing this spike. We did kind of start to see it during President Trump's presidency, but explain that for us.
So what you saw starting last October was a very slight uptick in numbers, but that was coming up to the election. So I think a lot of people around the world were thinking Biden would win, and let's get there first. We saw a slight uptick in October. It grew a little bit more in November. The election, Biden won, according to the press, and and then
you have the right crowd here for that.
So, I stay clear of that because I talk about border issues.
I don't stay clear of it.
So, so then in December it started going up more, but January is when it absolutely spiked, and February is even worse now. We're going to easily go over the numbers that we've had the worst in 20 years. The worst in 20 years.
So the worst in your entire, how long were you with the Border Patrol?
So I started in 97.
Okay, so you started in 97.
20-some years.
And this is the worst you've
Four
ever
administrations.
seen it.
I started under Clinton, Bush II, Obama, and Trump. This is the worst.
Okay, so 4 administrations, and so you can speak to something that again, you guys are going to be hearing this in the news. One of the things we're hearing is this is just cyclical. We see these cycles all the time, and so the question, I guess, is: do we see cycles? And if so, are these the kind of cycles they're talking about?
So there are cycles that are monthly. There's certain months of the year that there's predominantly more. It trends up a little bit, but there's no such thing as like a 20-year cycle. It's not like the locusts where they come out of the cicadas that come out of the ground every 17 years. That's not the case. That is this administration. I'm trying to be very careful how I talk, but they're being very disingenuous. Well, they're lying. Let's just go straight and say they're lying. There is no cycle, a 20-year cycle. There's nothing like that. There was a call that was made amongst some heavy hitters in the Democratic Party. What their talking points were going to be to push back. One was that it started under Trump. That's demonstrably out of context. Or two, that it's cyclical. That's not true. The border was under control. The border was the best I'd ever seen it in the last year or so. These were things. Look, I don't care if you like Trump or not. I truly don't. But judge each action on its merits. And these things he did on the border were working. They were working to secure the border. They were making it more humane. And in just days, President Biden undid all that.
So they were working. They were making things more humane. How so?
So I mean, we're holding probably close to 10,000 kids now, children. So when I say kids, be careful too what the press says. They're minors. They're juveniles. That means they're 17 and under. So, a lot of the 17-year-olds are tatted up and whatnot. We were having a conversation earlier that I remember questioning a guy, a beard, tats, and he said, I'm 14. I'm like, yeah, okay, sure, you're 14. Tell me you're 9. That's great, whatever. They tell us an age. We can't prove or disprove it. We have to go by what they tell us. But these are minors. They're under 18. We're holding over 10,000 now in horrible conditions. These are worse than ever under Obama or Trump. Worse ever. The Border Patrol agents that I've talked to, the ones that are speaking out now, are talking about horrendous conditions. And then you add in the pandemic. It's unconscionable what this administration is doing for their own agenda. It's unconscionable.
So let's talk about the conditions that are occurring right now then. So you're saying that under Trump's presidency, under his administration, conditions were getting much better. Now we're seeing conditions that aren't like that. And I'm hearing numbers, 2 agents to 800 children, something like that. So what's the numbers there?
So like in places in Texas where they have, and they keep trying to, apparently they're trying to name them as reception centers. They're processing centers, they're detention centers. In one pod, which is one thing, is supposed to hold like 60 people, they're holding 800 and some children with 2 agents to watch them. And what's happening is, again, you have 17-year-olds in there with 5-year-olds. You're having sexual assaults and you're having physical assaults because not all these kids are good people. I mean, you don't have to be 18. The MS-13 doesn't check your age. You have to be 18 to be in MS-13, Marisava Church of 13 or 18th Street or whatever. So a lot of these people that are 15, 14, 16, 17 are gangbangers. They're part of these groups. So they're all mixed together, and you have 2 agents to watch 800 and some people. You physically can't do that. They took down their fences mostly. They're plexiglass, which I guess makes it greener or whatever, or better. It looks nicer, plexiglass, but they're all crowded in. This is worse than under Trump when AOC and others went down to the border when the mainstream media had a field day with it. I believe it was AOC and Ilhan called it concentration camps. But there's crickets now. Nobody seems to mind. And I will tell you this, the thing as I get older that bothers me the most is hypocrisy, is the hypocrisy. So that was either selective or faux outrage from the past. So now you like Biden, it's okay to do it. Right. And that's reprehensible.
Well, not only is it okay to do it because now it's a different president, but it's worse.
It's worse than we've ever seen it.
Okay, so here, I want to throw another Bible verse out so we have some more of God's word to let this kind of push the conversation. But Leviticus 19, verses 33 through 34 says, "Do not take advantage of foreigners who live among you in your land. Treat them like native-born Israelites, and love them as you love yourself. Remember that you were once foreigners living in the land of Egypt, and I am the Lord your God." So you want to treat people the way you want to be treated. I mean, this is the golden rule. You're supposed to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. You're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. He's saying treat them like a neighbor. And what does that mean? So before we answer that question, I want to show them a video real quick of Joe Biden. This is one of the, this is a few of the promises he had made. Take a look.
is a total immigration bill to provide a pathway to citizenship for undocumented people in the United States of America. It makes no sense for us not to do that. And they're part of the reason why we're growing. They're part of the reason why, look, you have 24 out of every 100 kids in grades in school today are Latino, Spanish speaking. It makes no sense, none whatsoever, for us to walk away and not provide for access, not provide for education, not provide for health care. Look what's going on. And so it's part of the strength of the country. It's not a weakness. Of what I'm going to send to the United States Congress
that's it right there.
is a total immigration bill.
Yeah, so
to
here's
provide a
the
pathway
thing.
to citizenship.
He's saying we're going to provide health care. We're going to provide he starts listing out these things that he says we're going to provide. Now, how do you treat somebody the same way you're going to treat everybody else in your own nation? Well, that's giving more to what we're giving the people in this nation. I don't know about most of you in this room, but I can tell you this: healthcare for me is expensive. It's expensive. It's not something that is just handed over to me, nor should it be something that's just handed over to me. But what they're saying is this is something that we should be providing. Numbers chapter 15, verse 16 says, "The same instructions and regulations will apply both to you and to the foreigners living among you." The same set of rules need to apply. And this is God's wisdom saying, I'm gonna expect it from you and from the foreigners. So same set of instructions, same set of rules, but what we're finding right now is those rules that are applied to you and to me would not be applied to them. So, commit a crime, get let right back out on the street. If I committed a crime, I wouldn't be let right back out on the street. I'd be in jail waiting my arraignment. But this is not what's happening, is it?
Well, I mean, I'll give you a little thing that I'm talking to some people a while ago, and this started a few years ago with LA. You have health code laws for a reason. Whether you agree with them or not, you have health code laws for a reason, so we don't go to a restaurant and get sick. They decriminalize a lot of that, or they're not enforcing it for people who are here illegally and have street vending and things like that. They're not enforcing it because they don't want them to get arrested and then possibly get deported. So what you're creating in America is a dual-track justice system, which is the worst thing possible. You have DAs around the country that are not fully charging people that are here illegally because they don't want them to get deported. So you get arrested for the same crime as somebody who's here. And I use the term illegal alien. That's used by the federal government. It doesn't mean somebody is an illegal person. It means their status is they're here as an alien illegally. I don't make any apologies for using that term. So what's saying is if you're an illegal alien and you're a citizen or you're lawfully admitted for permanent residence and you commit the same crime, the DA in certain areas are going to undercharge the person who's here illegally so they don't hit the bill, don't fit the criteria to be deported. That's horrendous. The scales of justice now have somebody's finger on it, and that's terrible for our society. Justice should be blind. So when you're not going to enforce laws, or you're going to undercharge, or you're going to just ignore them because you want this class of people. And when I say illegal, don't assume from Mexico. One of the guys, my greatest arrest was this idiot from Canada. We arrest people with glee from around the world. If you're here illegally, I'll gladly arrest you. So it's not just from Mexico or whatnot, but they shouldn't have a separate justice system for them. And like you just said in God's word, that's not supposed to be the case.
Not supposed to be the case at all. We are supposed to have love and compassion. I mean, as Christians, we desire to be compassionate. We want to welcome immigrants. Of course, we want to do that. And of course, we also want to be safe. And the reason, I want to make sure we're talking about this tonight is we live just an hour away from this border, which there is truly a crisis at the border. And for some reason, this administration doesn't want to label it a crisis, but it's like you said, who are they sending down there right now?
So I mentioned to Pastor Tim earlier tonight that they sent FEMA down. Well, what's the second initial stand for? Emergency. So they don't send them out to football games. They don't send them out to people's picnics. They send them out when there's an emergency, which is a synonym for crisis. So it's so disingenuous. We're sending FEMA down, but it's not an emergency. It's not a crisis. Wow, you're idiots.
Yeah. That's a technical term.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to point something out about taking care of people equally. In the city of San Diego now, and I just did an interview on this, which they deleted from NBC, they are removing the homeless from the San Diego Convention Center. They've been housing them there because of the COVID-19 pandemic. They're removing them. and they're going to bring in, what they're starting to do now is bring in these UACs, unaccompanied children that are coming in from Texas, and they're going to send them to San Diego sector, the Border Patrol San Diego sector, to be processed, and they're going to be released, and they're going to stay at the San Diego Convention Center. So you're kicking out the homeless. Now, again, I like the word disingenuous, but Todd Gloria, and I know Todd, he's the mayor now, and since he became mayor, he's gone even further left. Nathan Fletcher, I know Nathan, he's the head county supervisor now in San Diego. They all agreed with this with HHS. Becerra now is the secretary. Their story is that, they were already starting to end the homeless at the convention center. I would bet if somebody did a Freedom of Information Act request from the press, and they won't, but they will find that they probably had the conversations with Becerra first, and then Mayor Gloria said, oh, hey, we're going to send these guys out. We don't need them anymore. The homeless don't need to be here anymore. I would suggest that's the timeline. They're pretending that the timeline was we already decided to remove the homeless. But the bottom line is they're removing the homeless from the convention center to house the children that are coming here illegally. So we're Christians, but we have finite resources. And my analogy to that would be, as a family, you, the father or the mother, you kick your kids out of your house to take in 2 strangers from another town, and you kick your kids out to the street. That would be the analogy I would use. And again, we're not treating people the same. We're treating a certain group of people better than the people that are here. And I'm all about helping people in their countries, their native countries, if they need assistance. I am not one of these knee-jerk people who said no foreign aid. It's sometimes cheaper to help that country out, as long as it's not disappearing into people's pockets, than to have them come here. But this is absurd, where they're gaming the system, the asylum system.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they want to come here. Of course they want to come here. It's an amazing place to live. Why else would people be coming here?
And I don't get it, because we're told we're such a horrible country.
We're told
Why
that
are
this
people
is so
coming here?
terrible. Yeah. Well, it's funny because it's the radical left professors in these universities trying to raise up this next generation to hate America. The fact is, if they would travel to some of these other countries in the world, which I have done. I've been to well over 20 countries. This is by far one of the best nations, if not the greatest nation to live in. I would say it's the greatest nation myself. I've been to a lot. I think it's the best. Maybe there's one out there that's even better to be in. I don't know. I haven't been there. This is by far the best nation I've ever been in. I want to show another clip, and there's a few points I want to kind of bring out in this, but this is White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, and she's talking about her concern about COVID at the border. Take a look.
When will reporters be allowed to tour facilities holding children who cross the southern border? And are there any concerns that the images from those tours might show that there's a crisis?
Well, first, we are working to finalize details, and I hope to have an update in the coming days. We are working through with the Department of Health and Human Services and also the Department of Homeland Security to ensure privacy and ensure we're following COVID protocols. We remain committed to transparency, and of course, as I noted last week, we certainly want to make sure that the media has access to these sites.
Of transparency to rebuild public trust.
That's it. There's just looping. But there's a few things I want to bring.
So many things.
I want to bring. So here's the first thing I want to bring up. So she's saying they're going to move kids. They're trying to move these kids out as quickly as possible. I've had multiple reports now telling me that the foster care system is going to be inundated. They've reached out asking the foster care families how many of these 5,000 children can you take into your homes through the foster care system, which is already, like you said, overcrowded and a huge expense to the American taxpayer. So they move them out as quickly as possible. But what happens when more come in? Because Gallup just came out with a poll that said 42 million people want to come here. That they polled 42 million people want to come to this nation. Let me say it again: 42 million people. What happened? And the messaging that's being given is go and go now. And if you can go and bring a child, definitely do that. That's the messaging that's being presented. What happens when we move these 5,000 kids out and 5,000 more show up?
So I'm Irish. I don't shut up sometimes, and I don't want to. There are 3 points I want to bring out. The Secretary Mayorkas of the Department of Homeland Security, who I worked for, not Mayorkas, DHS. I'm going to say again, he's a liar. The other day he did a press conference and said, we are removing family units and we're denying entry to family units. Well, then why are we spending $86 million in taxpayer money to put family units in hotels. Point number one. Two, what would terrify me, what should terrify all of us, is that we're not just giving these kids to family members, we're giving them to sponsors. Who's the
This
sponsors?
should scare our
So-
community to death, what he's about to tell you
I'm
right
a
now.
26-year-old man, and I go down and say, I'd love to sponsor, I don't know, 2 or 3 12-year-old girls. If you don't think that's not happening, then you're also fall into that category of idiots. The third thing, I'd like to tell this story if I may. Several years ago, I was on the border doing a border tour for the Union. And there was another group there from Port Loma Nazarene, which is a Jesuit school, very liberal. The Border Patrol itself was giving the tour, and the agent that was giving the tour knew me. He said, hey, Chris, you want to talk to these kids? And there's a bunch of college kids, mostly female. And they were for open borders. They were proposing open borders. So I went up and I introduced myself, and I said, I understand you want open borders. Okay, I make no moral judgment. I just want to talk about logistics. I said, I'm an environmentalist, and I used to work on some environmental issues on cross-border sewage and things like that coming across. And I said, and they were like, oh yeah, we're environmentalists too. Cool, very cool. I said, so the UN will tell you there's 7 billion people, más o menos, in the world right now. The UN will tell you that there's between 3 and 4 billion people that live in less than ideal circumstances. And that's a gamut. It's a large gamut. It means there's a country you live in doesn't have enough jobs for you. There's corruption. Maybe there's not enough food. There's a lot of crime and gangs. We're being persecuted to outright genocide. So it's a gamut, but there's 3 to 4 billion people, according to the UN, that live in places that they don't find ideal, they don't like. They'd rather not be there. So I said, right now in the US, we have 330 million people. If you open the borders tomorrow, if the House and the Senate passed a bill and the president signed it into law, that is, no matter how you got here, plane, train, automobile, swam, flew, whatever, you become a US citizen and welcomed. I said, so let's think that out. Let's think that through. A lot of people are going to come here very quickly because the law could change. They want to get in while the getting's good. So let's be conservative and say out of that 3 to 4 billion people that don't like where they live, you mentioned 42 million, let's say only a quarter of them, of that 3 to 4 billion people, want to come to the United States very quickly. That is 1 billion people. So halve that, call it 500 million. Be real conservative. And so I said to them, okay, so most of the people coming are not going to speak English through no fault of their own. They won't understand our government and our system through no fault of their own. They won't have a support network through no fault of their own. They won't have jobs through no fault of their own. So where are you going to house them? You're going to have to build these gigantic tent cities with railway tracks going in and highways going in and septic and sewage and water. And I said, so here's a list of federal, national, national parks. Which ones do you want to start bulldozing first? Yellowstone? Because where are you going to put 1 billion people? Logistics. So even 42 million, where are you going to put 42 million people? I would suggest even that number, let alone my number, would break the United States. I'm not talking about socially, I'm not talking about morally, I'm talking about just the sheer numbers and logistics. So I wanted to point that out, that 42 million I think is way too conservative amount around the people around the world who, if they could, would come here.
Oh, okay, let me clarify this. This was just from South America.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, that was from South America, 42 million. How many people live in the state of California right now? Is it some 38 million,
Yeah,
something like that? 38 million. So we're talking about 4 million more than what already live in this state. Now, of course, that would be dispersed, throughout, and again, just from South America. Here's another thing. Out of the video that we saw with Jen Psaki, White House press secretary, one of the things that she said was about the COVID testing. So at the border, we've got people coming. Many of them are sick. We've reported on this before, our watch, talking about things that are going on, flying in, and I've talked to you months back about how they were flying people into our county and other counties around trying to bolster the numbers. Now, that being said, we do have an incredible influx of people at the border. Many of them are testing positive, but they're not testing positive at first because they're not being tested. No. Now, she was saying that they're being tested, and the reporter that was challenging her on this said, well, not at the first stop, not at stop 1. So if you would, explain to us what happens when they get in, who's testing them, because, we'll bring up Texas in a moment and Governor Abbott, but kind of walk us through that process, if you would.
So again, did I mention Mayorkas is a liar? Maybe I forgot to do that. He made it sound, I read through it, and if you don't know, it sounds like everybody was being tested. When they receive medical attention, they're being tested. So let me explain exactly what that means when they receive medical attention. That means if the Border Patrol apprehends them and they have a broken leg, or they suffer a heart attack, or they're complaining of chest pains, we send them to the hospital. The hospital tests them for COVID-19 due to hospital protocols. But that's only the 1 in 100 we sent to the hospital. We, the United States Border Patrol, is testing no one for COVID-19. We don't have the resources, we don't have the people. Border Patrol agents are not capable of testing you for COVID-19. What happens when you come across the border illegally and we apprehend you, we have a piece of paper with a silhouette of a human being on it with some questions, and we generally ask you in Spanish, where does it hurt? Show me. And we draw little arrows on there. That's our medical screening. We are not medical personnel. We don't have public health service nurses or officials at our stations. So we don't test you for anything because we're seeing a lot of third world diseases, malaria, dengue fever, typhus, typhoid, tuberculosis. I've had to be quarantined for it. So we push you on now because we can't hold you and we release you. And so we either release you to an NGO, a non-governmental organization. It's a Jewish group in San Diego, and other places it's other groups. Or they were dropping them off right at the transit centers, which now they've been told don't do that. DHS has told them don't do. The optics are horrible, so they'll drop them off a block or two away from the transit centers. But for a fact, in San Diego, they were bringing them to the Irish Trolley Center and other places. So the only time they were getting tested at the second point was if an NGO tested them.
Right.
And they're not testing all of them. There's some towns in Texas, Democratic mayors are going, I don't have the wherewithal to test anybody, let alone my own people. So they're getting on trains, they're getting in, well, they're not in cars, they're going in trains, they're going on planes, they're going on buses, untested. When they're tested, it's anywhere between 8 to 10% of them have COVID-19. And yet
When
this
they're
government
tested.
is okay with that.
Right.
Yet we all have to remain locked down, but this is okay. And I truly feel, and I don't want to be a conspiracy guy, I can't stand conspiracies and all that, but I truly wonder if part of that is to pump the numbers back up again, and then we can shut you back down again. Because San Diego is going to see their numbers go up. And these border areas are going to see their numbers go up. And LA is going to see their numbers go up. And Houston and New York City, which is the big places they're going, are going to see their numbers go up again. And what's going to happen then? I truly think they're going to shut things down again. But they're not being tested by us at all. So if Psaki says it, if Mayorkas said it, I talk to people around the country in the Border Patrol, it is not happening. We don't do it. We don't have the wherewithal to do it. It is not happening definitively.
Yeah. So it's not happening. They're saying they want it to happen, and what they said they wanted to do was give money to Governor Abbott, give it to the state of Texas, and then have Texas be responsible for testing people at the border. Now, that's not Texas' job.
No, not in the
So
least.
can you kind of walk us through that a little bit? And that and the Democrats. So you're watching right now, what you're going to see and continue to see is the Democrats are actually pointing the finger at Biden.
Yes, so asking Texas to do this, there's some things that the federal government, it's definitively their job to do. That's to protect this country and its borders and immigration. That's definitively a federal job. Running the U.S. Armed Forces, it's a federal job. If we somehow go to war with Iran, the federal government shouldn't go to San Diego and say, hey, can you raise some guys up and maybe build a ship and send them over there? That's not the job of that's the federal government's job. Running the border and everything that goes along with it is the federal government's job. What Pastor Tim is talking about, the Democrats, there are several, and I did a lot with Democrats up to a few years ago as a labor guy, as a union guy for National Border Patrol Council. A lot of Democrats, certain Democrats, quietly are not happy with Biden because he made all these promises, but what they fully expected that he would do because of the pandemic, he would slow roll these things out, and he would have time to do at least some kind of processes in place, systems in place to deal with this. So it was a legitimate excuse for him to use, like there's a pandemic, hey, super left-wing guys, I can't do everything you want right away, I have to do some things first because of the pandemic. He didn't. First day in office, executive orders, throwing out Trump executive orders, changing things. And so there are some Democrats, some powerful Democrats that are really disturbed by that because they didn't expect this and they know the mainstream media is trying to cover for them, but they know it's getting out and they know it's giving them a black eye. So there are some Democrats that are high up aren't happy with this, and there's certainly Democrats on the Texas border, mayors and so on, that are, Queller, he's a Texas Democrat. He's not happy with Biden. So this was not well thought out. It was ill-conceived. None of this had to happen. None of this had to happen.
So why is it?
You have two choices. Biden is either fully on board with all this and he's going completely left-wing, which is always possible, or he has some cognitive difficulties and that he is signing paperwork that he's not fully aware of, and people are just giving him to sign to make the very left happy and to create a voter base. I mean, they're talking about asylum. They're talking about amnesty now for up to 11 million people. They're saying 4 million, but they're talking about all of them. And saying that you don't even have to have citizenship yet under H.R. 1, just that you're on a pathway to citizenship and you can vote in elections. So that's purely to have a large chunk of voters to come in and vote. I mean, why wouldn't you? If you came in and the Democrats let you come in and helped you become a citizen or whatever and gave you free stuff, you're going to vote for them. So pick your poison. He's either got some real cognitive issues and he's not quite clear on what he's signing, or he's signing deliberately because he's beholden to the far left. One or the other, but neither one is good.
Right.
So,
right.
You know.
So again, from the video, Jen Psaki, one of the things I'm wondering, and maybe you could speak to this. So I know there are reports now. Reports have come out that they're moving them on, moving the children because you want to move them out. We want to move them out real fast. Well, where are they moving them to? Foster care homes, but they're also
Sponsors.
Yeah, sponsors. That scares me to death. It's just some 27-year-old man says, "I'll take 4 of those 12-year-olds," and that's happening. And where do you think they end up in? The sex slaves. It just infuriates you. But military bases. So there are 2 bases at least in Texas. So it's 3 now? Okay. So that they're moving the kids to these bases in Texas. I've got reports from at least 3 people from Camp Pendleton that they're moving them to Camp Pendleton now. Is this common protocol? And if so, is this a good thing to do with children?
So I will, I have to be brutally honest. I'm never going to, not to tell you the truth. It happened under Trump and it happened under Biden. We did put kids for a while at military bases. But I've never heard of 3 or 4 bases having to be used for this. I don't ever think it's good for the military to have this. It's disruptive to them. It's people coming in because you have to have the people that take care of them. They're coming onto secure areas. It's disruptive for the military. And I don't really like to see anything that's disruptive to the military because they have one job in life is to protect this country. That's certainly problematic. I want to circle back to one thing. I want to circle back. I should have just started this whole thing. I'm going to circle back to you guys about everything.
Yeah.
Even when they say they're giving them to family members, we're not DNA testing most of these people. Right. So somebody comes in and it's their TO. We really don't know that. So it's not just the sponsors; it's the family units that I'm concerned about too. Years ago, when we first started trying to DNA test, and I met with these activist groups, I said, "Why are you opposed to this? Why are Democrats opposed to this? We want to find out if that guy that comes in with that little girl with her, that's really her father." And so the easiest thing is we're not using it for enforcement purposes. We're not keeping records. We just swab them both and find out if they're actually related. So, but we're not doing that now. We don't have the timeline to do that, to my knowledge, to almost anybody. We might be DNA testing in places that are not overwhelmed. But again, kids are being turned over to these family members that, again, I'm not really convinced that these are all family members.
Yeah.
And if you're from El Salvador, you're coming up, and this guy's MS-13, because they make a lot of money now, sometimes more than narcotics with selling kids. You could try to grab a kid, and the girl speaks Spanish, she's from El Salvador, you are, and then you're down that rabbit hole of sex slavery and forced prostitution, and all that we find horrible. I have friends that are liberals, and it drives me crazy. They're like, well, I'm against human smuggling and human trafficking. I'm like, it's the cartels, right? They're all the smugglers. It's the same people. There's not like a niche market where like I'm a boutique, I only handle human trafficking and the rest is. So they seem to think that they're okay smuggling just regular people, but it's the human trafficking. It's the same thing. It's the cartels. It's the same groups. So you should be offended and find it abhorrent that they do it at all.
Right.
But if the only thing you're against is sex trafficking, you should be against this. This is going to open up the floodgates for these poor kids to be used.
Right. Let's talk about that. It's going up with the floodgates. So there's a crisis at the border. This is worse than you've ever seen. Yep. You were there for some 25 years. 22 years. Worst you've ever seen.
Yep.
And it's poised to get even worse. What's going to happen to these children coming up along the way? What's been your experience and what you see they experience on the road?
Look, I don't pretend to understand what some parents are thinking down in Central America or other countries that send their kids up by themselves, 12-year-olds. We know this is the truth, that some of these girls are given the morning after pill. So you're a parent and you're finding ways to get your daughters morning after pills that are 12 years old because the expectation is they're going to be raped. I'm not quite sure what the thought process is. And again, I don't want to judge them because I'm not there and I don't know, but I have issues with that. I know the press sometimes likes to make fun of it, but I've seen personally when I worked down in Ajo and when I worked in Douglas in Arizona, what we call rape trees. And you would see trees out in the middle of nowhere with brassieres hanging from them and women's panties. That wasn't just some shits and excuse me, I'm from New York, excuse me.
You don't hear that in church every day.
I'm going to hear it from my wife later on. Sorry. They don't just do that for fun. There's a reason. It's sending a message to other women and girls. So when we interview them, we ask them, and the girls are honest, and they've been sexually molested, they've been assaulted, they've been raped. Some of them will tell stories about other girls being left to die. The cartels, when I first started, there were mom and pop smuggling organizations on the southwest border. They don't exist anymore. It's all been subsumed by the cartels, depending on the area. Everything that comes across that border that's illegal, cash from narcotics transactions, weapons, people, all that, it goes through the cartel. Everything that crosses the southwest border illegally is the cartel. So all those humans coming across, that's giving money to the cartels. These are not nice people. I worked Intel, and I watched videos that, I know there's some horrific ones on YouTube you can look up, which are horrible. I've seen worse than that. The things that cartels do to kids, cheese graters on their skin, just horrible stuff. This is what is smuggling these kids across the border, and yet the left, and I still differentiate between liberals and the left thinks this is okay for kids that are 12 years old to travel thousands of miles by themselves. Part of the reason is that they're going to come to the United States, they're going to be released, and then there's even talk about flying their parents up later on. So again, I don't want to judge them, but can you imagine being a parent going, you go first, get yourself situated in the U.S., and then we'll fly up to join you. You travel those thousands of miles, and we're going to fly, Delta on our way up, and cool. I have a serious issue with that, and I have an issue with people that think that's okay.
So the children are going through horrific situations. The amount of drugs that are coming across our southern
50%
border.
increase in seizures in the last couple months.
50%. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is not good. I don't know why they're hesitating calling it a crisis. It's really weird. Like I was saying at church on Sunday, like if you can't label something, how do you deal with it? You go to a doctor, well, I'm not going to call it cancer. I don't want to put that label on it. Like, well, how are you going to treat it if you don't know what it is? We got to call it what it is so we know how to deal with it.
Optics.
It's all, but the optics right now are you're fools because you won't call it what it is. That's the optic.
No, I'm going
to me anyways.
Because we see it and we look at different news sources and so on and so forth. But I have friends in New York and whatnot. I got into it with somebody on Facebook one time, and I said, but I work on, this is a while ago, but I said, I work on the border. I see this. This is firsthand direct knowledge. I live it. And then she threw back a New York Times article to me. And I said, I've actually worked with New York Times. I've worked with some of the reporters. Here's how they do a story about the southwest border. They call me on the phone from New York City, and they interview me on the phone. That's how they get their information. They call different people. I said, but I live it. This is the ground truth. And then she threw an LA Times article at me. And I finally said, so you're going to, and I asked her, I said, so what? And she says, I'm going to believe them over you. So you and I, we get it, we see it, we understand it, but there are people, especially in New York and in New York City and other places, they are watching just a couple things, CNN, MSNBC, and so on. They truly believe there's not a crisis. So you have to somehow break that bubble, and I don't know how to do it because they live in this, we all do to one extent or another, but they truly live in this bubble. And you could say, I'm there, I'm seeing it firsthand. Oh, I'm not going to believe you. I'm going to believe this reporter from New York City that's never been down there, but I'm going to believe them. So how do you fight that dynamic?
Yeah, well, you try to get some good press in there. But even right now, that was the whole idea of Jen Psaki's statement was we're hesitating letting the press in yet because of COVID. No, you're hesitating letting them in because you don't want anybody to actually have footage of 2 Border Patrol agents with 800 children.
It's kind of like if you all remember Star Wars, the original 3. I don't watch any of the other ones, but Obi-Wan Kenobi, what they're seeing with their eyes, this is not the crisis you're looking for. I mean, you're stupid. What you're seeing with your own eyes, it's not true. There is no crisis. It's just, but people believe it. I don't know what to say about that.
Talk to us about the morale. The guys and gals of the Border Patrol are down there. They're doing their job. The finger's being kind of pointed at them that it's Border Patrol treating these people badly. So, and firsthand that that's not the case. So what's the morale like?
So there's a couple things. The morale is again going down the toilet, down the drain. It was pretty good for the last couple of years. I get this goes with morale. So understand that on the southwest border, 63% of Border Patrol agents, or 66%, are what we consider minorities. So it's a minority-majority agency, mostly Hispanic, but we have African American, we have Native Americans, we have a huge LGBT community. We don't care as long as they're a good agent, God bless. So it used to drive me crazy when the press, and I've worked with CNN, and all these people would say, you guys are fascists, you're jackbooted thugs, you're racists. Well, most of them are Hispanic. A lot of them actually were born in Mexico and came over naturalized, served in the Marine Corps, whatever, and now they're agents. Or you're like me, you marry into a Mexican family. So they're told this and that they're bad, they're mean, they're ugly. I just talked about this the other day with some people, like, why are they overcrowded? Because Congress has to fund these buildings. We can't just pull a brand new reception center out of our backsides. Congress has to fund it. And if they refuse to fund it, that's on Congress. And the men and women in the Border Patrol I worked with, again, a lot of them served their country in the military. We get a lot of vets. These people care about the Constitution. They care about other human beings. The last big surge we had under Obama, guys came to me, men and women of the Border Patrol, asking me as a union official, could I find out, could they bring in toys and books for these kids? And the answer was yes, they could. Out of their own pockets, they brought these in. These are good men and women. So they're being castigated by people like AOC. How dare they do that? They're part of the problem. If you don't want to fund us, we don't have the facilities, we're overcrowded. That's on you. But the morale is going down the drain again, and we're going to watch as more and more people. I will point at this. So in federal law enforcement, for most federal law enforcement, mandatory retirement is 57. And it used to be guys would try to get waivers to say past 57. Now people are like me, they're bailing at 50, 51, 52, 53 if they have enough time. And nobody is staying to 57 because truly the job sucks now. It's all for all law enforcement, but particularly the Border Patrol, how they're treated, how the people think about them, how they talk about them. And then when you're two people watching 800 some kids and realizing bad things are happening to these kids and I can't stop it. And understand too, when they're pulling 500 some agents a day in Texas to do processing. That means they're not on the border, 500 some agents. That's why they're flooding narcotics across. And you're going to see fentanyl deaths skyrocket. But the morale is crap. The morale is bad. The morale's bad.
I've said that one
here. You get what you see here. So,
you were a police officer before you were a Border Patrol agent. But Border Patrol, police officer, they're both law enforcement. I want to share a bill with you guys. Maybe you have heard of it, but I want to share it with you all and then also get your take on this. But a new bill's been introduced here in the state of California by the Assembly member Ash Carla, who's out of San Jose. Big shock, San Jose. Again, Pastor Mike McClure, we love you, and he's up there in San Jose. That is the lion's den. But this bill is known as the California Law Enforcement Accountability Reform Act, or the CLEAR Act. It really sounds lovely when you hear it that way. The California Law Enforcement Accountability Reform Act. Sounds like we're going to do something wonderful. Well, this claims to combat the infiltration of extremists in our law enforcement agencies and would mandate a background check for all officers who would have exchanged racist and homophobic messages. So the idea with this bill is, if you are a law enforcement agent in the state of California and you attend a church that declares that abortion is a moral sin, or that a man should only be married to a woman should only be married to a man, if you are a part of a church or you have ever attended a church that holds that type of view, well, that view is in direct violation of somebody's constitutionally protected rights. So they're a hate group, and you as a law enforcement agent have now been a part of a hate group. So we're going to open an investigation into your life, and if we find that you've ever attended any place like that, you're fired. And if you've applied to be a member of law enforcement, and you are found to have been a part of any organization that's been like that, you won't get hired. What is that going to do to the morale in our law enforcement agencies?
So are you now, or have you ever been a biblical Christian?
Exactly.
Under oath, tell me.
Right.
We're going to blacklist you or fire you.
Right.
It's horrific. They're doing that in the military now too, but not by a law, but they're purging the military of alleged supremacists who, agree with the Constitution and weird things like that. I got to tell.
Even though you stand there with your hand up saying, I swear to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. You swear to that, but then when you actually do that, Well, now you're a criminal.
So I like to tell stories because they help me illustrate the point. Several years ago, I was representing one of our agents in an internal affairs investigation. And what had happened was they had found he was a member of, not Oath Keepers, maybe it was Oath Keepers. He was a member of one of those groups. And he had posted some stuff, and they went crazy and thought this was like insurrectionist stuff. And this was a few years ago. So we're in there, and I said, so tell me, to the internal affairs guys, tell me what he posted that's so offensive. And they started talking about the Tree of Liberty needs to be, and I said, so here's what I'm going to do when this is over, guys. You might want to go off the record here. No. I said, okay, keep taping. I'm going to go to the ACLU, and I'm going to go to the press that you are going after an agent because he's quoting from, Thomas Jefferson, something that you read about in our history books, founding father, president of the United States. So you're saying that's offensive. They didn't know that phrase was from Thomas Jefferson. And I said, so I'm going to make you guys look stupid. You might want to talk to your management, whatever. And so they said, off the record. And we talked, and that went away. But they were literally looking to take disciplinary action against this agent because he had quoted Thomas Jefferson about certain freedoms and the Tree of Liberty needs to be refreshed with the blood and so on and so forth. So that happened a few years ago. I can only imagine now what the great purge will be in law enforcement. And you're going to get an ideologically pure type of police officer, but it might not be the type of police officer you want. We should have
Certainly
all types.
not the type I want.
And the bottom line on your police officer should be to uphold the Constitution of the United States and to uphold the laws that are constitutional. That's the bottom line. I know Border Patrol agents, they live that, the Constitution. If they were ever ordered to, take that whole group of people out back and shoot them, they understand that's an unconstitutional order and they won't do it. But if it's constitutional, we'll do it. And that's what you want in your law enforcement. I mean, I've had people on the left tell me, you guys shouldn't enforce these laws and these laws. And I'm like, you really want me to start picking and choosing what laws I enforce? These are legal laws that Congress passed. But that's horrific, and it's this downward slope you're going to see in the military and law enforcement. You're going to get an ideologically pure law enforcement that isn't probably what you want, is probably not going to enforce the laws fairly and across the books. That's terrifying. That's terrifying. That is, and it's blatantly unconstitutional.
Well, a lot of what's happening in our state is blatantly unconstitutional. A lot of it. The fact that we're not supposed to be open right now, blatantly unconstitutional. So it's just frustrating to know that these things are happening. And I know so many people that are members of law enforcement, and this passes, and it's just going to be a nightmare for them because it's going to make you. What this is persecution. It's going to make you have to be silent. It's going to make you have to just not talk about the Lord, not talk about your faith at all, make sure your social media is wiped clear.
Nothing anti-abortion, nothing like that.
Yeah, I'm okay with babies being murdered in the womb. I'm okay with two dudes getting married.
I'm not pro-Second Amendment.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's gonna neuter our men and women in law enforcement that truly do love the Lord. It's gonna neuter them. It's gonna put a gag on their mouth, and it's wrong.
And make no mistake, nobody in law enforcement that I know of, I've worked 5 different agencies. I started when I was 18 in New York back in '82. Nobody I've ever met with wants to work with corrupt law enforcement because they're my backup. I have to rely on them. I don't want to work with somebody who's blatantly racist. I don't want to work with anybody like that. That's not what this is about. This is about control and muzzling. And again, it's not going to be good for society. Not going to be good for a constitutional republic. Not at all.
So this is overwhelming, hearing all this stuff.
I wish I wasn't here. From last year, I haven't had to do any of this. No speaking engagements, no news media, nothing, because things were going well on the border, and now.
Yeah, let's make sure we understand that. So this is what he does. He goes around and he talks about it. Nobody's wanted him to come out and talk for the last year.
I was good with that.
Why? Because nothing was happening. Everything was good. And all of a sudden, he's getting flooded with people that want him to come out and talk. Why? Because there is a crisis at our border. It's just that simple.
I don't think crisis is a strong enough word. I got to be honest with you. I don't think it's a strong enough word when kids are going through this, when we're being overwhelmed, when we can't enforce the laws that are duly recognized by Congress and the President. When we can't do that, that's more than a crisis. That second letter in FEMA. That's an emergency. So I don't even think crisis is strong enough. But yet we have administration just bound and determined to not use that word. Like if we don't use the word, it's okay.
Right.
But words have meaning and words have power, right, as we know.
Right. I know it's probably hard to find right now, but can you find any sort of encouragement for our audience tonight? What, if you could leave them with some sort of encouragement, what would it be?
Well, let's see. If you live in New York or you're in California, let's see. Cuomo's having issues, and Newsom has issues. So things are being opened up miraculously. I don't want to be cynical. So there is some movement there. There are certain lawsuits that go on that seem to come to fruition at times. My passion, I'm a Lutheran all my life, though I've been to Catholic services, I've been to Jewish services, a lot of different services. My passion, I talk about this a lot, that a lot of it's just in the hands of the Lord right now. I mean, things look really grim, but there's always some things to look forward to that seem to be. My thing is Biden might have overstepped dramatically on some of these things, and it might backlash on him. Again, though, I mean, I'm terrified. I mean, this is not the positive, but I'm terrified of them packing the Supreme Court. I'm terrified of Puerto Rico and D.C. becoming states. I'm terrified that they really truly think that they will have a one-party government forever. But on the other hand, there is pushback. I would say that we're reaching the people that we already get this. I try to figure out how we can reach more moderates and people even slightly left of center. My wife keeps track of a lot of that, what's going on with that. There are people that seem to be kind of understanding what's happening, that even are moderate or left of center, because we need to convince them that this is not good for this country, that every single thing is not race, so it does seem that some people are waking up to that. I guess that's my only thing, is that some people are waking up that what the Democrats are selling has never worked.
Yeah. No,
I'm trying to find.
You don't know this, but I just wrote a book called Awake, and I agree with you 100%. I think a lot of people are waking up. I think a lot of people are waking up. They're starting to see, and we're going to see on both sides of the aisle. We're going to see people really start to know the difference between good and evil, right and wrong, light and darkness. And this is where we're at, because the lines are drawn so clear at this point. And you maybe you don't realize you did it, but I think you hit the nail on the head as far as encouragement. I just want to encourage you guys. Habakkuk chapter 1, you read that prophet, he says, "How much longer, Lord? How much longer do I have to see this stuff?" This is going, he even says the law is powerless. And it's a frustration that the prophet had. And you know what God said? He said, "I'm working a work in the background. I'm doing something right now that's so great that even if I told you what I was doing, you wouldn't believe it." And just remember that. God is on the throne.
I would say, though, I think God needs us to participate in making things better.
I would tell you, he doesn't need us at all, but he chooses to use us, and we should want to be used. You know, because the thing is, if he doesn't have to use us, he chooses to. What an awesome thing that we have the privilege of being used in a time like this. So, Christopher Harris, thank you. I know you're a busy man. Thank you for coming out. It's been a pleasure. Will you hang around and talk to people? Okay, so he'll hang around and talk to you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to go.
Guys, I don't shut up, so if you want to talk to me afterwards.
All right. Next week, we've got Dr. Shawnee Anderson. Maybe you guys have heard of her. She's an incredible woman of God and incredible doctor, so love to have you come out. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. She's a clinical psychologist, and we've got a lot that she's going to be bringing to the table next week. So thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you for everybody that tuned in online, and we will see you next week on Our Watch with Tim Thompson. God bless you.